conversation Jim and I were some conversation Jim and I were having. We were talking about, you know, what Bill Wilson might have read because it's a questionable, kind of deal. And I was like, if he read anything in the meditation world, he was reading Marcus Aurelius. That's what he was doing.
Yeah.
And Jim
And
was
I
like, no,
said,
I don't think so. I don't think so.
why would Bill ever read? I just don't know where he'd get it and sure enough, it's in his library. It doesn't, there are a lot of them that have notes, it was
Yeah.
a gift from or what date, but this doesn't have any notes, but it's in there.
Maybe Lois read it.
Maybe.
And stuff. Now, before we start, I have bad news for us. I know some of us might know this already, but Bill Sherberg, you'll be saddened as well because Dennis, who used to come here quite a lot, has passed.
Oh no, Dennis Farley. No, really.
Yeah. That was sad. I was sad to hear that.
I've got him on. I got my Outlook pop up is going to say call Dennis because you haven't heard from him in a long time. Yeah. Oh man, yeah.
Yeah.
He was having problems health wise. He and I talked about that. Yeah.
Sad to hear that.
Memories of Dennis. He used to be always the first guy in. Do you remember? We used to be always the first guy in with the question in the Q&A. He was always the first guy in, wasn't he?
Yep. He was a good man.
Good man.
And I think he bought 50 copies of my book and gave them away. So he was a really good man,
He passed them on, he did. Well, God bless you, Dennis. He sent me stuff as well over. He sent me a cover for my big book as well, which I have on. Yeah, he sent me a cover for that over as well. So there you go. No, we think of Dennis, and of course, he died sober. Hey, indeed. Now, are there any new people here? I'm looking at Iceland there. I'm seeing Iceland on the page. I'm still recording, by the way. I should leave it on, actually. Should I pronounce your name? Should I have a go at that?
Yeah, try.
Hi.
Hi.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. My name is Rolmer.
Well,
It's my second time at this meeting.
I missed you last time.
Yeah.
You're very welcome, Humar.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Good.
Where did you hear about this? Just for out of information about the book. You heard Mr. Sherberg's book. Have you come across it recently, or?
I heard about this meeting from Susan.
Oh, Susan.
She's here.
Oh, good. See, Jim, where's Jim gone? Susan.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Does Susan carry the message still?
Yeah, I think you also joined AA History Only too.
Ah, good.
Yeah. So great.
Susan's paying off our debt. Well done, Susan. You're here, aren't you? You're here.
Hi, guys.
Hello, Susan.
Hi, guys. Hi, good to see Rolmar. Wonderful.
Good to see you.
Looking forward to tonight.
Yes,
It's a big
I'm
night.
really looking forward because we know it's
Chapter.
Mr. Sherberg's favorite chapter. We do know it's his favorite chapter, and he's sweated blood doing this chapter. Bill, I'm smiling. I should be probably smiling because you probably did. A lot of painstaking hours you probably put into this.
This one was I don't know 3 months or something to write this freaking chapter. So it was just painful. I kept stumbling over more things that weren't right in the hallowed stories. It was just like, really? I couldn't believe it, but there it was. So
3 months.
had to package it so that it made sense to me and it would make sense to the reader. So we're hoping we got that accomplished.
You certainly have, for me anyway. I'm sure for lots of people you have. So Jim is here as well. So we've got Jim Worley with us as well. Jim is a history only. Jim, any news for us? Something we should know about?
Me? No. Everything's copacetic.
Right, then we'll get straight into it. I mean, this is a fantastic chapter, isn't it? And we're on chapter 23. It's titled, or numbered, should I say? And it's titled, as we said, "Writing the 12 Steps." And it's December.
Oh.
And this shocks me. December. They wrote this 12 steps. Just for information, I'm going to get into it in December 1938. Now, Bill, sure, I need to mention this as a disclaimer against your book. you put in about the stories in Akron and the stories in New York as the story. We're going to mention the names of who wrote them tonight, but that's not in your book. So if we get it wrong, it's no reflection on your book. I want to put that out there. So we're just going to mention the names after the stories. So that's no reflection on you. So there you go. We're in December 1938, and Ebby was still drinking, and it didn't look as if he was going to stop anytime soon. This was both frustrating and painful for Bill because there seemed to be nothing more he could do for the man who had first brought him the gift of sobriety. Thatcher was definitely on a run, and even his current residence in a New Jersey evangelical Christian community wasn't helping him to control his drinking. If Ebby's intimate knowledge of the effectiveness of the spiritual solution and his experiences during a couple of significant periods of sobriety couldn't keep him sober, then what possibly could? Bill found the whole situation baffling. At the same time, Hank Parkhurst was relentlessly pushing him to write a much more secular version of their solution and had offered his own completely non-religious chapter, quote-unquote, to employers, along with the proposed quote-unquote Q&A chapter as two concrete examples of how that program of recovery could be packaged and presented to the world. But even in the face of Hank's constant barrage of suggestions, Bill Wilson steadfastly refused to take the book in the direction his friend insisted was so necessary if they were going to turn it into a runaway bestseller and thereby get people sober all across the country. Despite these persistent arguments, Bill continued to write about a method of recovery that relied primarily on a supreme being and a spiritual solution so essential for any successful attempt to quit drinking. And the first subheading is titled A Challenge of Heroic Proportions, Gigi.
Thank you, David. In addition to all of this personal turmoil, Bill had a much larger problem. He had finally reached the point where he had to put down on paper a set of clear instructions on how to get sober, something so quote unquote airtight that the rationalizing alcoholic wouldn't be able to quote unquote wiggle out of it, no matter how hard he tried. Doing so in a way that hopefully addressed Ebby's difficulties while simultaneously incorporating at least some aspects of Hank's more secular approach seemed to be an impossible task. Further complicating the matter, any set of instructions would have to acknowledge and accommodate the much more orthodox religious program practiced by Dr. Bob Smith and the sober men in Akron. How to satisfy all of these profoundly contradictory constituencies was a challenge of heroic proportions. By the first week of December, Bill could not hold off any longer. He had to write something that described in precise detail, quote, how the program of recovery from alcoholism really worked, quote, close quotes. 8 expositional chapters had already been drafted and edited, providing more than, quote, enough background and window dressing, close quotes, for the book. Finally, he was going to have to put down in black and white and in simple declarative sentences, quote, a definite statement of concrete principles, close quotes, telling the new man exactly what he had to do to get sober and then stay that way. It was the seemingly insoluble problem that he had been dodging for far too long, one that he later admitted, quote, had secretly worried the life out of me, close quotes, for some time. Finally, it was time to stop procrastinating and to start writing.
At this most critical and important juncture in the story, for nothing is more central to the book Alcoholics Anonymous than the program of recovery outlined in the 12 steps. There are, unfortunately, no primary documents mentioning the actual writing of the steps. It is an unexpected gap in the otherwise rich archival records that provide a rust and vivid picture of early A history from late 1937 right up until this point in late 1938. But now, at arguably the single most significant moment in the entire story, any historical account must rely solely on the stories Bill Wilson told much later about how he wrote the 12 steps. There is not one document preserved from December 1938 or from the months immediately after that to confirm or contradict his version of what happened. It is simply not mentioned. Compounding the problem and raising serious suspicions about Bill's absolute accuracy here is the fact that the first recorded instance of him telling the well-known story of how he wrote the 12 steps appears in a letter he wrote Jack Alexander on December 13th, 1949, a full 11 years after the event. How so much time could have elapsed without this important story being told sooner is a mystery. This is truly problematic. As has been noted here repeatedly, Bill Wilson was no great respecter of the actual facts when it came to AA history. When he wrote or talked, his purpose was not to deliver a precisely accurate accounting of what had actually happened. And whatever inconvenient or messy details were encountered, Bill would modify them, sometimes significantly, and then streamline the whole story for the dramatic impact he felt was necessary to underline the specific moral or inspirational message he was trying to deliver to his audience. The previous chapters had supplied more than enough evidence that historians who rely on Bill's talks or writings for reliable historical information do so at their own peril. But in relation to this particular event, the day he formulated and wrote down the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, we have no supporting contemporary documents whatsoever to rely on for confirmation or contradiction. There is only Bill's later version of the story, a story he told a number of times throughout the 1950s and the 1960s. What follows here is not a direct quote from Bill Wilson, although it does include many words, phrases, sentences, and even whole paragraphs taken directly from his later talks and writings. Instead, it is a composite story, which is indicated here by the use of italics, cobbling together different details he did mention at one time or another during his various recountings of the day he first wrote down the steps.
The day Bill Wilson wrote down the steps.
The stock in our new company wasn't selling anywhere near as well as we had hoped, and some of the New Yorkers were really unhappy about the fact that we were even trying to raise money in this way. A couple of AA members came over to my house in Brooklyn, and we got into a big argument about the whole arrangement. The discussion got so heated that at one point we were actually yelling and screaming at each other. It was upsetting for everyone, but it hit me particularly hard. Why couldn't these guys see how essential this money was for us to finish and publish our book and realize this stock offering was the only way for us to get that done? The worries about what these money arguments might be doing to our group, and being still mad as hell at those two guys for refusing to buy any stock, wasn't the only problem I had on my mind that day. We had reached the troubling point where I knew something had to be done about the rest of the book, and it was a problem that had secretly worried the life out of me for some time. Clearly, the distant reader would need a broader and deeper articulation of the program of recovery than we had already presented in the book, and whatever was written would have to be as clear and comprehensive as possible. Knowing the alcoholic's ability to rationalize, I realized something airtight would have to be written. What was needed was a set of specific directions, a definite statement of concrete principles that these drunks just couldn't wiggle out of no matter how hard they tried. These problems brought on another of my imaginary ulcer attacks, my typical reaction to stress in those days. And then to make matters worse, I fell into one of my depressive snits. The combination of these two argumentative guys and the impossible challenges I was facing with the book had put me in a really bad frame of mind. I was feeling dejected and discouraged. Most of all, I was suffering from a terrible case of self-pity. I finally went upstairs to the second floor bedroom and laid down on the bed in an attempt to soothe my ulcer. But once there, I was completely overwhelmed with just one thought. Poor me. Poor Bill Wilson. However uninspired I may have felt, I was still nagged by the thought that I had to come up with a broader and deeper concept of the program, one that was much more explicit than the 6 word-of-mouth steps, which had gradually evolved since Ebby first visited me in the fall of 1934. Having arrived at what is now Chapter 5, we realized that a specific program of recovery had to be laid down if we were going to make any further progress with the book. Slowly, my mind came into some kind of focus, and as I lay on the bed, I ran over in my head the word-of-mouth program that was currently in use and then jotted them down. Although the 6 steps of that program were subject to considerable variation, they were approximately as follows. 1, we admitted that we were licked, that we were powerless over alcohol. 2, we made a moral inventory of our defects or sins. 3, we confessed or shared our shortcomings with another person in confidence. 4, we made restitution to all those we had harmed by our drinking. 5, we tried to help other alcoholics with no thought of reward in money or prestige. 6, we prayed to whatever God we thought there was for power to practice these precepts. Obviously, this was just too loose. There were far too many loopholes here that an argumentative alcoholic could exploit to wiggle out of doing what he had to do to get sober. What we needed was an absolutely explicit program for these people to follow. I also worried that if I simply wrote down those 6 steps, they would be too big for the reader to digest all at once. I decided that what I needed to do was to break them down into smaller pieces, making them not only more explicit, but also much easier to understand and less subject to misinterpretation. Although I was still far from anything that could be described as a spiritual mood, I was well aware this was something that absolutely had to be done. I relaxed and asked for guidance, and then picked up a pencil and the cheap yellow tablet lying beside me on the bedside table. With that tablet of paper propped on my knee, I finally began to write, splitting up our word-of-mouth program into smaller pieces. My purpose was to draft more than 6 steps, but how many more I did not know. With a speed that was astonishing, considering my jangled emotions, I completed the first draft in perhaps half an hour. The words kept right on coming. When I reached a stopping point, I numbered the new steps and saw that they added up to 12. Somehow this number seemed significant. Without any special rhyme or reason, I connected them with the 12 apostles. I had started with the idea that we needed to broaden and deepen the basic concepts of the program by making them more explicit. But that was the only idea I had when I began to write. The most amazing thing about this experience was that I didn't seem to be thinking at all as I wrote. The words just flowed out of me, and I've come to believe that these steps must have been inspired because I wasn't in the least bit inspired myself while I was writing them. I have no idea why I wrote the steps down in that particular order or why they were worded as they were. I paused to read over what I had written, and one thing I noticed right away was that I had certainly enlarged the scope of the 6 steps considerably. One of the reasons for this was that I had significantly changed the order of their presentation. Most especially in our 6-step program, we'd held off mentioning God until we got to the very end, and that was the only mention we made of him. We were afraid any earlier mention might scare off some of the drunks before they even got in the door. But for reasons unknown to me, my new formulation not only mentioned God several times throughout, but I had moved him right up to the very beginning of the steps. Whatever, I didn't pay much attention to that at the time. I actually thought it all sounded pretty good.
The sole author.
The fact that there is no contemporary evidence to support any of the details in Bill's account of writing the 12 steps is troubling and troublesome because a careful examination of Bill's story reveals some serious difficulties with his version of what happened that day. Before exploring those problems, there is one fact that is beyond any doubt. Bill Wilson was the sole author of the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. His singular responsibility for writing the steps has never been seriously challenged, although on occasion AA urban legends have credited Dr. Bob Smith or the Reverend Sam Shoemaker as either the author or as the co-author of them. However, since both men have publicly and categorically denied having had anything to do with the writing of the 12 Steps, Bill's authorship remains clear and unchallenged. Beyond this one undeniable fact, Bill's ready willingness to play fast and loose with the past naturally begs the question of why he might have told the story of the creation of the 12 Steps in this particular way. While many of those details might well be true, several parts of his story are certainly plausible. There's a very real possibility that the first writing of the steps wasn't actually the sudden, inspired event he has so frequently reported. Instead, it is possible their creation was a much more judicious and deliberate affair, a process of formulation, whether conscious or unconscious, over several weeks of reviewing and contemplating his own experience while he got sober.
Another version of how the steps were written.
However, there is a very different story about how Bill wrote the 12 Steps, one he told almost 2 full years before he rolled out this story of being inspired to break down an existing 6-step program. That earlier version appears in a letter Paul Kirby Hennessy wrote to Bill Wilson on October 19th, 1948, recounting in some detail Bill's earliest version of the story of the day he first wrote the steps. 10 months earlier, on January 31st of that year, Paul had accompanied Bill and Lois on a train ride from New York City to Washington, D.C. They were to attend an AA regional banquet there the following night, and Hennessy was scheduled to speak about the late Fitz Mayo. According to Paul, the quote, conversation on the train naturally veered toward Fitz and then to the 12 Steps, end quote. Once that topic had been raised, Hennessy says that Wilson, quote, described to Eileen Barrett, end quote, and myself, the evolution of the 12 Steps. Paul reminds Bill that when he finished, quote, I said that this was the first time I'd ever heard the story, that I believe it was of sufficient importance to commit to writing. I am still of that opinion, end quote. In his October letter, Paul asks Bill to review the enclosed document, saying that if it, quote, needs amplification or clarification, please let me know, end quote, so that the changes can be made. If, however, Wilson finds it to be correct, Hennessy asks him to indicate so by initialing one of the 2 enclosed copies and then sending it back to him. In the same envelope was a memo dated October 12, 1948, entitled Bill's Story of the Evolution of the 12 Steps. In his third-person narration of Wilson's conversation on the train, Hennessy states, quote, Bill said that Fitz himself had no actual part in the writing of the 12 Steps, but that his spiritual perception and influence were a definite factor in their formulation. Bill went on to explain how the pioneers in AA thought and prayed their way through to recovery. In his effort to rehabilitate himself, the alcoholic was obliged, 1, to admit he was powerless over alcohol, 2, to make an inventory of his own character, 3, to put trust in God, 4, to work with other alcoholics. As it stood, this program needed clarification. Bill sat down and began to figure out the various phases of his own recovery. Setting them down on paper, he found there were 12 separate and distinct steps, end quote.
Hennessy, a Rhodes Scholar and a practicing lawyer, notes for clarity's sake and rather legalistically in his final paragraph that, quote, as soon as we reached Washington on that trip last January, I dictated my version of Bill's story to Eileen Barrett, who agreed with my version as outlined. This memorandum has been compiled from the original draft, which is now before me, and also from a subsequent conversation with Bill. End quote. Paul mentions mention of a subsequent conversation strongly implies that Wilson had since confirmed this version of the story. Why else would Hennessy even bother sending him this memo for his written approval? This is a significantly different story from the one that later became so famous.
Bill's recovery experience as basis for the steps.
Besides the presentation of an interesting 4-step program, Wilson claims he, quote, began to figure out the various phases of his own recovery, end quote, parenthesis, rather than breaking down some earlier version of the steps, close parenthesis, and then used those phases of his own recovery to formulate the 12 steps is a startling admission. According to this earliest available version of the story, the 12 steps weren't the result of a sudden inspirational expansion of the fellowship's collective experience, parenthesis, 6 steps which had, quote, gradually evolved, end quote, since Ebby's 1934 visit, close parenthesis, but rather a judicious reformulation of the most important elements Bill could identify in the different actions he himself had taken on the road to sobriety. The creation of the 12 steps based on Wilson's own experience is in fact a much more likely scenario than the later claims of an inspired elaboration of the supposed 6 steps. When Bill wrote the first 2 drafts of his own quote-unquote story the previous May, the first explicitly contained 8 of the later steps and the second mentioned 10 of them. As already noted here, combining these 2 lists from May provides us with 11 of the 12 steps. It is not beyond the realm of possibility that when he began to formulate his quote-unquote definite statement of concrete principles, Wilson had taken some time to reread his own story to refresh his memory of what he had actually written about the steps he himself had taken to get sober. Frankly, it is a significant stretch of the imagination to imagine how the 12 steps could ever have been the result of his decision to break down those 6 steps down into quote-unquote smaller pieces. The 6 steps quoted in the italicized section above contain only 2 full and 4 partial steps, while the 4 steps Bill mentioned to Paul Hennessy contains just 2 full and 2 partial steps. Even taken together, these lack almost all of the actions suggested in the fully realized 12 steps. To break those 6 steps up into smaller pieces and transform them into the 12 steps would have required a tremendous amount of creativity, including the addition of several new ideas and a number of specific previously unmentioned actions that would have to be taken. On the other hand, to see the newly packaged steps as a direct reflection of Bill's own recovery experience presents no such problems. On this December evening, 6 months after writing his own story, Bill had simply recycled the material found there and repackaged it into a more organized and neatly numbered format.
Deflecting the spotlight. Questioning Wilson's veracity on this particular story naturally begs another question. Why would he even bother to change his 1948 account of judiciously reviewing and transcribing his own experiences into the 6-step story he later told? Why not just continue with the story Paul Hennessy heard on the train? The most plausible explanation is that this change was another one of Wilson's many attempts to direct attention away from himself and to dim the spotlight constantly shone on him for his central role in the creation of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not only plausible, it is highly likely. During the years of AA's early success and growth, Bill Wilson had a significant problem keeping his own ego in check, something that years later he would candidly admit.
Quote, from the start, the proposed title for the book, The Way Out, was popular. If we gave the book this name, then I could add my signature, quote unquote, by Bill W. After all, why shouldn't an author sign his book? I began to forget that this was everybody's book and that I had been mostly the umpire of the discussions that had created it. In one dark moment, I even considered calling the book, quote unquote, the BW movement. I whispered these ideas to a few friends and promptly got slapped down. Then I saw the temptation for what it was, a shameless piece of egotism. End quote. This paragraph is just one illustration of the ego problems Bill struggled with. Could there be a better illustration of his grandiosity than the BW movement? And also evidence of his later efforts to downplay his central role as the founder of AA. As his notoriety and reputation grew within Alcoholics Anonymous and beyond, Wilson used all of his storytelling skills in a campaign of self-effacement, a concerted and calculated effort to minimize his singular responsibility for the creation of AA. This effort to lower his profile went far beyond just polishing the facts to make a more dramatic and easily comprehensible story. Bill Wilson was an active myth maker, constantly creating stories that spread the credit of his own actions to as many other people as possible.
The text quoted above is a perfect example. Over the last 20 years of his life, Wilson consistently asserted that he wasn't really the author of the big book. It was, quote unquote, everybody's book, a distillation of the collective experiences of the first 100 men, a book they had written and presented to the world. He would frequently declare that his only role was that of the, quote unquote, umpire of the discussion that created it, end quote, a claim he repeated whenever he was given a chance. This is so far from the truth as to be almost laughable, but it is a perfect example of the purposeful reformulation of AA history, of creative storytelling that Bill regularly used to protect himself from his own ego. Myth-making proved to be his best defense against the, quote, "you are the man who saved my life," end quote, adulation that followed him everywhere throughout the rest of his life. Regarding the story of how he became the umpire of the text, Wilson says that during the arguments following his presentation of the 12 steps, he despaired, quote, of satisfying everyone, and I finally asked that I might be the final judge of what the book said. Seeing that we would get nowhere without such a point of decision, most of the group agreed. We began to carry on again, end quote. Perhaps the closest Bill ever came to telling the truth about his, quote, "I was just an umpire," end quote, myth came in a 1960 speech where he noted that, quote, "I was awfully leery of the rows over the book, but that situation looked better because I had been appointed the umpire. That if I would listen carefully, then I finally could take a decision about it," end quote. There is some hidden irony in this comment about his appointment as the person authorized to take a decision on the book, for it clearly implies that the AA members in New York, parenthesis, or was it just Hank and Fitz making those demands, close parenthesis, did not think Bill was listening carefully enough to their suggestions. And why would they have negotiated such a condition for granting him the power to decide what should and should not go into the book? Perhaps the most obvious example of Bill's recasting events to draw the spotlight away from himself, a reformulation that goes far beyond good storytelling and crosses over into intentional myth-making, is the ever-expanding proliferation of quote-unquote co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous over the years. This is the most prominent of Bill Wilson's attempts to take the focus off his role, his sole responsibility for starting AA, keeping it alive, and nurturing it, whereby he all but single-handedly wrote the big book and became the sole author of the 12 Steps, its core teaching. Over the years, the number of co-founders grew and grew as Bill liberally spread the credit for the creation of AA in every available direction, attempting to lower his own justifiable claim to be AA's undisputed founder. In this same myth-making way, Bill's revision of the 1948 story of writing the 12 steps based on his own experience into one where the steps were the result of breaking up the 6 steps word-of-mouth program, something which happened almost automatically, end quote, must have been inspired, end quote, serves exactly the same purpose. Wilson could not deny he was solely responsible for creating the steps, But this new inspired story redirected the credit for their invention away from him as much as possible by saying that he was simply, quote unquote, breaking down the collective wisdom of the group at that time, and that while doing so, he had, quote, he had to, quote, think little at all, end quote, for, quote, the words kept right on coming, end quote. This often repeated story later prompted Sam Shoemaker to characterize the writing of the 12 Steps as, quote, one of the great instances of direct inspiration that I know of in human history, end quote. Sam's evaluation was one that suited Bill Wilson's purposes exactly.
The 6-step program myth.
Steve.
Bill Sherwood, if it's okay. The 6-step program myth. And we have the author.
One particular element in Bill's story, the details of the 6-step program supposedly being followed before the 12 steps were created, has generated considerable attention from AA members over the years. Most of that interest, however, has been driven by the misconception that there actually was a definite, universally agreed upon, and rigorously followed program of recovery in place before Wilson invented the 12 steps. This mistaken belief was directly and decisively addressed in a recent online comment by the respected religious scholar and AA historian Glenn Chestnut. Quote, there is no evidence that there is any formal set of quote-unquote 6 steps being listed and followed by people in AA prior to Bill Wilson's writing of the 12 steps in early December of 1938. People who like things neat and tidy with lists to memorize tend to get carried away with the idea of these 6 steps and start imagining early AA meetings with a window shade mounted on the wall displaying the list of the quote 6 steps and everybody sitting around memorizing and analyzing quote the 6 steps. End quote. Wilson is surely to blame for this misunderstanding because he mentions the 6-step program in such a concrete, definite way and with such regularity in his later writings and talks. But it is important to note that while his list creates the impression of this being a specific, detailed program for recovery, even in his most widely quoted presentation of the alleged 6 steps, Bill does qualify what he is about to say by noting this is just one version of what was, quote, a pretty consistent procedure, and, end quote, that this procedure was nonetheless, quote, subject to considerable variation, end quote, and they are only, quote, approximately as follows, end quote. Note well that, quote, unquote, considerable variation and that, quote, unquote, approximately. Tellingly, there is no mention of the 6-step word-of-mouth program in any of Wilson's writings or talks until May 1949, 10.5 years after he supposedly used them as the foundation of his creation of the steps. That month, speaking before a convention at the American Psychiatric Association in Montreal, Bill categorically stated that there had been an early 6-step program, but he did not present them as something that had evolved or that had been subject to considerable variation over time, as he later claimed in Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age. Rather, in his first presentation of the 6-step formula, Wilson said they were exactly what Ebby Thatcher had communicated to him during their first encounter in late November 1934. Quote, while disagreeing with many tenets of the Oxford group, my former schoolmate did, however, ascribe his new sobriety to certain ideas that this alcoholic and other Oxford people had given him. The particular practices my friend had selected for himself were simple. Number 1, he admitted he was powerless to solve his own problem. Number 2, he had gotten honest with himself as never before and made an examination of his conscience. Number 3, he made a rigorous confession of his personal defects. Number 4, he surveyed his distorted relations with people, visiting them to make restitution. Number 5, he resolved to devote himself to helping others in need without the usual demand for personal prestige or material gain. Number 6, by meditation, he sought God's direction for his life and helped to practice these principles at all times. Although a few words here are slightly different, this list corresponds closely to the more famous presentation in Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age, parenthesis, quoted verbatim in the italicized story above, close parenthesis, excepting only for the substitution of meditation for prayer in the 6th step. However, it is important to note once again that in this, its initial appearance, Wilson claims that this was the essence of the program of recovery from the very start, rather than, as he repeatedly later said, something that gradually evolved over time. The point here is not to minutely examine every variation of the 6-step program Bill Wilson ever offered. There are several, and he was clearly not paying much attention to the changes he was constantly making, but rather to demonstrate and emphasize the fact that his mention of a 6-step program first saw the light of day more than a full decade after the 12 steps were written, and that these lists of the 6 steps were never presented in any kind of consistent or definitive way. As Ernest Kurtz noted, this formulation of the word-of-mouth program was something Bill Wilson later, quote, contrived, end quote, for his own purposes as a literary device, a storytelling convenience, and it has been recognized as such by all serious AA historians. Despite Wilson's 1949 claim that these 6 steps harken back to the very beginning of his own sobriety, they do not. In later revisions of this story, Bill acknowledged that the program of recovery had changed considerably since Ebby had first visited him in 1934. It had certainly evolved to the point where there was some sort of routine approach helping people stay sober in December of 1938, but there is no mention of anything in the early records even remotely resembling Bill's reputed 6-step program. In Wilson's defense, it could be claimed that the historian's maxim, quote, unquote, absence of evidence is not proof of absence, might apply here, but there actually is a tremendous amount of contemporary documentation showing exactly what people were doing to get sober before Bill wrote the 12 steps, and none of it suggests anything like his alleged 6-step program.
Members' stories reveal a procedure for recovery.
These solid contemporary sources, a first draft of Fitz-Mayo's story, Frank Amos's 1938 report, and the 30 personal stories written for the Big Book in late 1938 and early 1939 provide detailed accounts of the quote-unquote pretty consistent procedure being followed by AA members in both Ohio and New York before the steps were written. While this evidence does support a fairly consistent set of procedures for stopping drinking, they bear little resemblance to the semi-formal 6-step program Wilson later described.
Fitz-Mayo's story.
Fitz-Mayo's initial draft of his Big Book story, titled Me and John, that is Barleycorn, was written in mid-1938, and it provides a brief glimpse at the steps and the program of recovery being practiced in New York City when he got sober in late 1935. This initial draft, parentheses, which is much shorter than the later version entitled, quote-unquote, Our Southern Friend, close parentheses, clearly highlights the dramatic evolution in the New York City program between late 1935 and late 1938. It also amply illustrates the kind of changes involved in the editing of at least some of the New Yorker's personal stories as the book got closer to publication. In both the first and the published version of his story, Fitz finds himself a patient at Towns Hospital, where he is approached by a man who tells him that however hopeless he may feel, quote, there are men on the streets of New York today who are worse than you, and they don't drink anymore, close quotes. In the earliest draft, when Mayo wondered how this could be possible,
the man asked, would you be willing to try to live on a new basis, to try to live up to ideals, by trying to be absolutely honest, absolutely pure, absolutely unselfish, and absolutely loving in all your relationships with your fellow man, to get rid of this drink problem. Quote, of course I would, unquote, I declared without much thought. Quote, I'd do anything, unquote. Quote, then all of your troubles are over, unquote, said the man, and he left the room.
In this first draft, Fitz describes a program of recovery, such as it is in this extremely abbreviated form, that is pure Oxford group. Salvation from alcohol can be had by adopting the four absolutes as the guiding principles of your life and then acting accordingly. This is not surprising given Bill's strong connection with the Oxford Group in late 1935, a connection that lasted right up until mid-1937. Lois Wilson, in one of her rare departures from the stories her husband always told, acknowledges this when she claims that Bill had to write the 12 steps because, quote, the 6 Oxford Group principles that the fellowship had been using were not definite enough, end quote. Whatever steps there might have been in AA prior to mid-1937 could only be described as Oxford Group steps, and it was these that formed the basis for whatever evolved after the New York group declared their independence in mid-1937. But by the time Mayo's story was printed in the Multilift edition just a few months later, the text of this central paragraph had changed considerably.
And he asked me if I believed in a power greater than myself, whether I call that power God, Allah, Confucius, Prime Cause, Divine Mind, or any other name. I told him that I believe in electricity and other forces of nature. But as for a God, if there is one, he has never done anything for me. Then he asked me if I am willing to right all the wrongs I have ever done to anyone, no matter how wrong I thought they were. Am I willing to be honest with myself about myself and tell someone about myself, and am I willing to think of other people instead of myself and of their needs to get rid of the drink problem?
The original version of this encounter, which is surely how that conversation actually went, was rewritten to conform to the changes in the New York program over the intervening 3 years. Rather than being pressed to accept the 4 absolutes, parenthesis, something Evie almost certainly recommended did it during his famous late November to visit Bill rather than the 6 steps Wilson later claimed, close parenthesis, Fitz was now reporting that he was asked if he had any kind of belief in God and if he was willing to take an honest personal inventory, share it with another human being, make amends for past wrongs, and overall become a less self-centered, more loving and caring person, all of which had now been brought into line with at least 5 of the newly minted 12 steps.
Frank Amos's story.
Frank Amos prepared another contemporary report describing the program of recovery after his visit to Ohio in February of '38. In, quote, notes on Akron, unquote, he identifies 7 actions required of a new man adopting the Ohio system for staying sober. 1. An alcoholic must realize that he is an alcoholic, incurable from a medical viewpoint, and that he must never again drink anything with alcohol in it. 2. He must surrender himself absolutely to God, realizing that in himself there is no hope. 3. Not only must he want to stop drinking permanently, but he must remove from his life other sins such as hatred, adultery, and others which frequently accompany alcoholism. Unless he will do this, absolutely, Smith and his associates refuse to work with him. 4. He must have devotions every morning, a quiet time of prayer, and some reading from the Bible or other religious literature. Unless this is faithfully followed, there's grave danger of backsliding. 5. He must be willing to help other alcoholics get straightened out. This throws up a barrier and strengthens his own willpower and convictions. 6. It is important, but not vital, that he meet frequently with other reformed alcoholics and form both a social and religious comradeship. And 7. Important, but not vital, that he attends some religious service at least weekly.
There is certainly a rough correspondence here between some elements in this system and the later 6 and 12-step programs of recovery: an admission of defeat, surrender to God, the need for prayer and meditation, and the requirement of working with others. But even these similar sounding Ohio steps, parenthesis numbers 1, 2, 4, and 5 above, close parenthesis, are delivered in phrases much more strident and directive than anything found in either of Bill's later formulations. In addition, there are several elements here, items number 3, 6, and 7 above, close parenthesis, that are not found in either the 6 or the 12-step versions. An absolute requirement to cease sinful acts, the need for regular meetings with other alcoholics, along with a strong suggestion for weekly church attendance. Should another reminder be needed, Amos's report underlines the diverging nature of the Akron and New York programs, significant differences that are reported to be the very essence of the Ohio system just 9 months before Bill Wilson sat down and wrote the 12 steps.
Members' stories, 1938 to 1939.
The final source of contemporary evidence for the early program of recovery comes from the 30 stories written for the Big Book in late 1938 and 1939. If there actually had been, as Bill claimed, a pretty consistent procedure of 6 steps before December 1938, it would be reasonable to expect those steps to be mentioned, either in whole or in part, in the stories written by sober members during the 2 months before and the 3 months immediately after that December. But this is not the case. While making amends and working with others are referred to a few times in those stories, the only steps that consistently show up throughout these stories are the admission of defeat and the necessity of surrendering your life and your drinking problem to God. In fact, if someone were to just read the stories in the back of the first edition of the Big Book, they would readily and logically conclude that it was the decision to surrender to God which was solely responsible for saving all of these men and one woman from their former lives of self-destructive drinking. But this central and necessary surrender to God doesn't even make an appearance in Bill's reputed 6 steps. Given Amos's reported Akron requirement that a man, quote, must surrender himself absolutely to God, realizing that in himself there is no, quote, hope, end quote, it comes as no surprise that the Ohio stories are the most explicit on this point. Of the 18 personal stories they contributed to the book, fully 16 of them candidly acknowledge a belief in and dependence on God as either the sole or the primary explanation of how they got sober. The 16 short excerpts below make the point abundantly clear, providing repeated evidence that the admission of powerlessness and a surrender to God of both your drinking problem and your life are the 2 most important elements required of a man who really wants to stop drinking.
Thank you. And just before we go into the titles of the stories, this is a disclaimer, any errors with the authors here is down to Tom Nias and myself. We reference them from the authors, the book title, The Authors by Fiona Dodd and Nancy Olson of History Lovers. So Eamon is not with us, and I've asked Joe H to read for Eamon. So hopefully, Joe, you got my message. If not, I'll just jump in. So the first story is The Doctor's Nightmare, page 193, Bob Smith, MD, Akron.
You think you are an atheist, an agnostic, a skeptic, or have any other form of intellectual pride which keeps you from accepting what is in this book, I feel sorry for you. Your Heavenly Father will never let you down.
The European Drinker, pages 214 and 215, Joe Doppler, Akron, Ohio. And if Joe doesn't read that, I'll read.
Okay, can you hear me?
Good man, Joe. Well done. Jump in.
Okay. Okay. You can't win unless you try God's way. Huh?
This one, you've been trying man's ways.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. You've been trying You've been trying man's ways, and they will always fail, he told me. End of quote. Quote, you can't win unless you try God's way. That day, I gave my will to God and asked to be directed.
And Joe, traveling editor, scholar, pages 263, 264, and that's from Jim Scott, is in Akron, Ohio.
No conviction was necessary to establish my status as a miserable failure at managing my own life. I began to read the Bible daily and to go over a simple devotional exercise as a way to begin each day. Gradually, I began to understand.
The Backslider, pages 270, 271, and this is Walter Bray, Cleveland, Ohio, which is Akron.
Joe.
Okay. Oh,
Tom?
All right. This is all my life, he said. I had been
No,
doing
no.
things of
Go on. You're good.
I had been, thank you. I had been doing things of my own human will as opposed to God's will, and that the only certain way for me to stop drinking was to submit my will to God and let Him handle my difficulties.
We are live. So Homebrewmeister, page 281, and this is Clarence Schneider, Akron, Ohio. Tom, let's give that to Joe.
okay. Tom, spiritually, I have found a friend who never lets me down and is ever eager to help. I can actually take my problems to him, and he does give me comfort, peace, and radiant happiness. For all these blessings, I thank him.
And let's stay with you, Joe, on this one. Tom, I'm telling you, the 7-month slip, page 286. This is Ernie Galbraith, and this is Akron, Ohio.
Okay. Eamon?
You don't need to mention the Eamon. You don't need to mention them, Joe.
Okay. I only know that as long as I seek God's help to the best of my ability, just so long will liquor never bother me.
Good man. Thank you very much. My wife and I, page 295, and this is May Bella and Tom Lucas, and of course, it's Akron, Ohio again.
They were living proof that the sincere attempt to follow the cardinal teachings of Jesus Christ was keeping them sober. I acknowledged my fault to God and asked His help to keep to the course I had to follow.
And this is a ward of the probate court, page 301. Bill Van Horn as William V. H. And this, of course, Akron, Ohio. Mm-hmm. Joe, that's you, Joe?
Yeah. I learned the secret. They had a religious experience. I was willing and renewed my acquaintance with God and acknowledged Him as a reality. I found it easy. I came to life and have been free now for 2 years. I hope to never take another drink.
And this is Aceful 711. This is the multi-lit printing, personal stories, page 65. An anonymous individual from Akron we have here, whose identity has never been confirmed. Tom, you might have more information. And it is the only original manuscript story that was never included in the first edition.
But if friends and fellowship were to disappear tomorrow, I don't think I would be dismayed. Back of all that, there is the knowledge that I have a divine Father, that as long as I try to walk as He has laid down for me to do throughout my life, nothing of ill can befall me, that if I wish, I can be sober for the rest of my life.
And this is the Salesman, pages 322, 323. I'm just going to say Bob O for this one from Akron, Richfield, Ohio, but it's Akron, right? Mm-hmm. Joe Haley.
Okay. They made it very plain that I had to seek God, that I had to state my case to Him and ask for help. Every morning, I read a part of the Bible and asked God to carry me through the day safely. I've been sober for 2 years, kept that way by submitting my natural will to the higher power. And this is all there is to it.
And the next one is the Fearful One, page 334, and that's Archie Trowbridge, again in Akron, Ohio.
And it was so simple. The sum and substance of it seemed to be that if I would turn to God, it was very probable that He could do a better job of my life than I had.
And Truth Freed Me, page 338, and this is Paul Stanley, Akron, Ohio. Joe?
Are you right with the Father who knows your needs before you ask? If so, your help comes from an ever-present and all-powerful Father.
And the next one is A Close Shave, page 349, Harry Zollers, and that's again Akron, Ohio.
I feel that the combined effort of these three Christian gentlemen made it possible for me to have a vital spiritual experience.
Next title is The Car Smasher, page 369. That's Dick Stanley in Akron, Ohio. Joe?
This I did. I ask for, accept, and acknowledge this help, and know that so long as I do, I shall never take a drink. And what is more important, though impossible without the first, all other phases of my life have been helped. There is, it seemed to me, 4 steps to be taken by one who is a victim of alcoholism. First, have a real desire to quit. Second, admit you can't. Parentheses, this is the hardest. End of parentheses. Third, ask for his ever-present help. Fourth, accept and acknowledge this help.
An Alcoholic's Wife, page 379, and that's by Marie Bray from Akron, Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, but Akron are still sticking with.
Since giving my husband's problem to God, I have found peace and happiness. My husband and I now talk over our problems and trust in a divine power. We have now started to live. When we live with God, we want for nothing.
Next title, a great title, certainly. The Rolling Stone, page 390, Lloyd Tate, again, Akron, Ohio.
Is that me, David?
That's you, Joe.
Okay. A religious awakening was conveyed to me through some unseen force. I have found a new life, and I know as long as I do the few things that God requires of me to do, I shall never take another drink.
The New Yorkers, despite their vaunted reputation for greater skepticism, were only slightly less demonstrative in their stories about the centrality of God's role in their remarkable recoveries. In addition to Bill's own story, 10 of the other 12 East Coast stories made this claim explicitly.
Now, this title is The Unbeliever, pages 199 and 205, and that's, of course, Hank Henry Parkhurst, and we're looking at New Jersey here, and I will read that. It said, he raised my hopes so high, it looked as though he had something. I don't know. I guess I was so sold that I expected him to spring some kind of a pill, and I asked him desperately what it was, and he said, God, and I laughed. 6 pages later, this floor is cold at my knees. Why are the tears running down my cheeks? God, have mercy on my soul. A Feminine Victory, page 221. This is Florence Rankin in New York City.
Are you willing to give up? Are you willing to say, here it is, God, all mixed up. I don't know how to unmix it. I'll leave it to you.
Our Southern friend, page 226, John Henry F. Fitzmayo. That's Cumberson, Maryland. And the thing I do is to say, God, here I am, and here are all my troubles. I've made a mess of things and can't do anything about it. You take me and all my troubles and do anything you want with me. A Businessman's Recovery, page 249. That's Bill Rudell, William R., New Jersey. Joe, you have a go at that one.
Okay. It had never occurred to me that he, in his infinite wisdom, knew much better than I what I should have done and be and do, and that if I simply turned the decision over to him, I would be led to the right path.
Smile with me, at me, page 347. This is Harold Sears, New York. From that day, I gave and still give and always will time every day to read the word of God and let him do all the caring. Who am I to try to run myself or anyone else? Next story is titled Educated Agnostic, page 355, and it's Norman Hunt, Darien, CT.
A belief in the basic spirituality of life has grown, and with it, belief in a supreme and guiding power for good. The first step I took when I admitted to myself for the first time that all my previous thinking might be wrong. The second step came when I first consciously wished to believe.
Another Prodigal Story, page 361, and this is by Ralph Furlong in Springfield, MA. And Joe, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. Then the next day, a fine fellow came, and in a halting but effective way, told how he had placed himself in God's hand and keeping. Almost before I knew it, I was asking God to clean me up.
On His Way, page 377, and this is Horace Popsy Maher, New York City. Popsy says, I should not be surprised to find myself coming to the astounding conclusion that God, whoever or whatever he may be, is eminently more capable of running this universe than I am. At last, I believe I am on my way. And the next one is an artist's concept, page 385, and this is by Ray Campbell from New York. Joe, can I go there?
Okay, these men were thinking straight, had given themselves, their minds, over to a higher power for direction. The day I made my first efforts in this direction, an entire new world opened up for me. Drinking as a vicious habit was washed completely out of my consciousness.
And the next story is Lone Endeavor, page 395, and there is a footnote in that, and this is by Pat Cooper from California, written by Ruth Hawk, based on correspondence sent to the Alcoholic Foundation by Cooper and his mother. And this was later removed after first printing. Kid, I think we'll do the kid.
Yes, I knew that the only way to combat this curse was to ask the help of that greater power, God. God is my only chance.
Well, thank you for everyone there, especially well done, Joe Haley, for stepping in there. Next subheading, back to the reading. The next subheading is a loose and simple path to sobriety.
This constant and uniform refrain of asking for God's help as the primary solution to the alcohol problem, and the lack of any other common specific steps to be taken to achieve sobriety, is overwhelming contemporary evidence that there was no agreed upon and accepted 6-step program before December 1938. Instead, all these reports show members following a very loose and simple path to sobriety, one that might be most easily summarized in 3 basic steps. Number 1, admit you're licked. Number 2, surrender your life to God. Number 3, act accordingly. Parenthesis, that is, pray, meditate, help others. Close parenthesis. Given this overwhelming evidence regarding the essence of the program of recovery as it was being practiced up until late 1938, Bill Wilson could not have been more correct when he said that, quote, a definite statement of concrete principles, end quote, absolutely had to be formulated and included in the book, something that the rationalizing alcoholic just couldn't, quote unquote, wiggle out of no matter how hard he tried. This was way too loose and subject to far too many interpretations to ever be effective. It could hardly even be called a program of action. By this time, the point should be abundantly clear. Other than the references scattered throughout Bill's story, the reputed 6 steps receive no significant mention in any of the other 30 stories written for the Big Book. This universal silence is surely a quote-unquote an absence of evidence, but it is so uniform and so overwhelming that Bill's claim of a more sophisticated 6-step word-of-mouth program is revealed to be a fiction, one he created to avoid acknowledging that the 12 steps were based almost exclusively on his own experience.
An inspired event.
Despite all these controversies and quibbles, there is no denying that Bill Wilson created something important, unique, and profound in early December 1938. His 12 steps have not only helped millions of people stop drinking since that time, they have also served as the foundational principles for scores of other life-saving recovery programs worldwide. Whatever the circumstances and whatever the source, Bill Wilson's 12 steps are revolutionary in their simplicity, their clarity, and their effectiveness. Given the confusing and contradictory conditions under which he labored, it was an accomplishment so amazing that many people have agreed with Wilson's later observation that the creation of the 12 steps was a truly inspired event. Others claim Bill's formulation of this intensely spiritual set of suggestions as a program of recovery was nothing short of miraculous. And indeed, for a man who was still several days short of celebrating his 4th year of sobriety. It was nothing less than a miracle.
The quote unquote original 12 steps.
Bill's first draft of the steps has been lost. So any attempt to reconstruct how they might have read in their original unedited form involves a fair amount of speculation. Still, if we presume that Wilson's first version was, as he said, quote, a set of specific directions, a definite statement of concrete principles that these drunks just couldn't wiggle out of, end quote, then it is logical to presume that they had been couched in some very directive language, the same kind of language found throughout the multilith printing of the book produced just 2.5 months later. Assuming that change in voice and tone, it's possible to start with the 12 steps as they appear in the multilith printing and reverse engineer them by deleting the few changes Bill said were later made to his first draft. With a change in voice coupled with this delete and restore procedure, such a change in voice coupled with the delete and restore procedure produces a version of the quote-unquote original 12 steps that would likely read something very close to this.
1. Admit you are powerless over alcohol, that your life has become unmanageable. 2. Come to believe that God could restore you to sanity. 3. Surrender your will and your life over to the care and direction of God. 4. Make a searching and fearless moral inventory of yourself. 5. Admit to God, to yourself, and to another human being the exact nature of your wrongs. 6. Be entirely willing for God to remove all your defects of character. 7. Humbly, on your knees, ask God to remove your shortcomings, holding nothing back. 8. Make a list of all persons you have harmed and become willing to make complete amends to them all. 9. Make direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continue to take personal inventory, and when you are wrong, promptly admit it. 11. Seek through prayer and meditation to improve your contact with God, praying only for knowledge of His will for you and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual experience as the result of this course of action, try to carry this message to others, especially alcoholics, and to practice these principles in all your affairs.
With this new radical outline in hand, Bill now had to sell it to the rest of the AA members, not just to those in New York who were so deeply divided over the religion versus psychology controversy, but also to the profoundly religious members of the Oxford Group's Alcoholic Squad out in Ohio.
End of chapter 23, writing the 12 steps, December 1938. Bill Shaver, tremendous. Thank you, sir. You can unmute if you'd like to jump in. Thank you.
It's amazing in record time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much,
Great
everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Wonderful meeting.
A blessing.
And great writing and compiling, Bill.
Thank you.
That
Thank you
was
very, very
fabulous.
much.
Great reading,
Yes.
everyone.
Very much.
Thank you,
Read it
thank
again.
you,
It's
thank
so
you.
good. It's so good, I'd read it again. I would. Especially after we listened to you last night. We were listening to you last night, Bill. You weren't with us. You were here in spirit last night. We listened to your first 2 forwards last night. And reading this today just adds, that meeting last night added a lot to it. But it's great to have you here. Bill, would you like to come back and share some of your thoughts with us?
Yeah, well, a whole bunch of things are interesting. One of the things I'm really proud of is when, I did that composite story, the one that's in italics. I think Jim read that whole story.
Yep.
And there's 40 footnotes there. So I begged and borrowed and stole stuff from 40 different places that Bill Wilson had either spoken or written about this particular event. And cobbling those things together was fun. I don't know how else to describe it. It was just great. Oh, I could stick, this one goes in here. I'd find new things and I'd stick them in that story, because he changed the details all the time. It was the same, it was the same thing with the kitchen table story he changed the details all the time when he told the story. So I was trying to composite them all together, do a composite story there. And that was fun to write. And I think it was great to read because, it kind of makes it alive. I think that was a pretty alive version of that deal, you know, it sounded good. Yeah, I'm just a whole bunch of things, you know, he said, well, you know, one of the things I quoted here, he said, you know, one of the things was that I had moved God up in the steps, you know, we used to save God until the end. I was like, where the hell was that happening? That was not happening in Ohio, I'll tell you that. And I doubt it was happening too much in New York City. But again, that's like, he's just making that stuff up. Honestly, really, really. I mean, look at those stories from New York. I worried when I was writing this that putting in those, I don't know, there's like 26 of those things, you know, that it was just going to be boring for people to read. But it's really, the thing is, if I just tell you that's what it says in those stories, it's not the same as actually reading what they said in those stories, because people don't read the stories out of the first edition. And those are just short excerpts. There's a lot of stuff in those stories that support my contention that they were just like, turn it over to Jesus and everything's going to be okay. That's the deal. And
Oh my God,
that's the deal. And then, you know, if there are any steps mentioned, it's 4 steps. It's 4 steps which don't look like the other ones. I love that stuff. So then hold off. We used to hold off on God till the end, you know. It's like, well, maybe Parkhurst was doing that, but that typically wasn't what was going on. I wondered, you know, I've never wondered this before. So we're reading it, and Frank Amos has these 7 things that come, and you know, I've seen the original type document, 7 things, you know, and I never stopped to think like, did somebody hand Hank a list of those, Frank a list of those things, or did he listen and listen and listen and compile it in his own head? And did he make the list? Where did that numbered list come from? Where did that breakdown of what they were doing in Ohio come from? You know, it was just, I don't know. I never thought about that before. Who was responsible for the numbered breakdown? Was that somebody in Ohio did it? Was it something Frank did? Or was it something that was a combination of those two? And we don't know because Frank doesn't tell you where those particular 7 things came from. I could have to go back and maybe read his statements. It's in the appendices in the back of the hardback. Maybe he mentioned something about where that came from. I don't know. The other thing was that just on page 440, I did this thing, and you know, where Wilson really thought that they just could hold off no longer. He had to write something described in precise detail how the program of recovery worked. As people who have seen my Working with Others presentation, I've really come to the conclusion that Wilson wasn't bothered by this nagging thing throughout writing the whole book. Sooner or later, I'm going to have to put these things down in numbered sequence. I've come to believe, since the book was published, that when Bill Wilson finished Working with Others, he thought more about alcoholism, we agnostics, and Working with Others was the essence of what everybody was doing to get sober. And if you read the stories in the first edition of the book, it supports it completely, that those were the 3 things going on. You know, you had to admit you were licked, that you had no power over the insanity of the first drink, even if they weren't using that particular language that was so prominent throughout the 164 pages of our book. But, and that you know, you had to surrender. You had to give in to God. And the God was an Abrahamic God, one you could pray to and get help from. That was the deal. Oh, and by the way, we should be working with other people, because that's, you know, and as I said at the end of that Working with Others presentation, I don't think it's the one online. I think it was the one I did later. It kind of goes to prove to me that Wilson gives his big diagnosis that you have no mental defense against the first drink and more about alcoholism, that you gotta do the deal with God in We Agnostics. That's Bill's solution, and Working with Others is Hank's solution. It's the moral psychology thing. So I was like, not only did I realize that Bill Wilson thought he was done when he finished Working with Others, I really believe that, but he also thought he had punched his ticket, his own ticket and Hank's ticket. Hank got a chapter, Bill got a chapter. This kind of solution, and where those things work, don't work, that's what you got to do. What Hank says, do what Hank says. So anyhow, that was I don't know, man. It's just, yes, this was the most difficult painful chapter for me to I just couldn't make any sense out of it.
Mhm.
Because I knew it wasn't right. I knew what I was being told wasn't right, but I had no idea what was right. And then Michelle, the archivist down in GSO one day, found this folder that said the writing of the 12 steps, and it had that 1948 letter from the lawyer telling that story. And I was just like, oh my God, and nobody yet, maybe out there, I know Jim's been looking for it. Nobody before 1948 says, oh, and there were 6 steps, and that's what we did to get sober. So
you only came across that while you were doing the writing. You only came across this gentleman in the train story.
Yeah, I was so deep into this thing. I was talking to Kevin Hanlon and Jay Stinnett and to Art Sheehan and all those the big guns. And I don't know that I ever got a hold of Glenn Chestnut at that point, but I mean, it was just like, what the hell's going on here? Because this story doesn't hold water. So how did we get this story? Where did this story come from? Why do we have this story? And if this isn't the right story, what is the right story? And quite frankly, I think I did a pretty good job of producing my thesis on what I think the right story is, with lots of evidence as opposed to lots of speculation. Although there's some speculation in there, and it's noted as speculation. Like at the end, I say, we don't have a version of the 12 steps, but some speculation might end up with this. So, okay.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that with us. Let's go to Jim Worley from A History Only. Jim.
Thank you, David. Thanks, Bill. What a great chapter. And that I had forgotten that bit about Hennessy, the lawyer. That it just like a lightning flash of and the earliest time that he told the story. Because and you mentioned it, and we've seen so many. There's a South American poet, Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Yeah,
and he I ran across something, and it made me think of Bill Wilson and me. But and he says, life isn't what we have lived, but it's what we remember and how we remember it so that we can tell our story about it. And it's that just really hit me. It's not everything I've done, but what I remember and how I remember it so I can tell my story. And Bill did that a lot. I think we've seen, and this thing about I've listened to a lot of his recordings too, and different details and different times, and he mentions different things. And I was reading, I got into reading again because this number 4 just comes up a lot. 4 steps. It was in Stanley's, kind of Car Smasher and Hennessy, and in Bill's original story, he has the 4 steps, and that's those 4 steps, at least in the original story, pretty much cover everything that's in the 12 steps. And the way you mentioned it, he wrote it in his Bill's story in June of 1938. So this was already really done, by the time he got to December. And but the way he cobbled it together, and very interesting that that we don't have those original, well, we can kind of guess at them like you did, but that they got lost somewhere along the shuffle, and there are some archives that we don't have or that have not been rediscovered yet. But really interesting stuff. Thank you. Great. Put it together really great. Thank you.
And Jim, I just got to follow up. And I was on a Zoom call with a guy in New Jersey earlier today, I've never met him, but Sally introduced the two of us. Sally at Stepping Stones introduced the two of us, and we Zoomed for about an hour. He's got a bunch of letters that I've never seen. He's got a letter from Jim Burwell to Clarence Schneider saying, so how'd you get this thing off the ground up there? Because he's trying to do it in Philadelphia. And there's stuff out there. There's more stuff out there, and it's scattered around in different AA archives and in different AA collectors. This guy's a collector.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I think the thing I've somewhere along the line I got a copy of that letter too, but where I got it I don't know. But a lot of these archives, especially the big ones in the big cities, have a lot of things that nobody else has. And the thing is that I don't want to use the word jealousy and proprietary, but archives can be, I've got this and you don't, and they don't want to share a lot of things. And then we're just talking about some of the big city archives in the States. A lot of things really have been discovered in South American and in European places too. There's a lot of stuff still undiscovered.
And that's not just true of AA history. There's all this stuff that's buried away there's so much stuff in some of these archives, nobody's looked at it for decades or centuries. They just found a copy of the Declaration of Independence in a Siemens notes over at I think it's the British Library. It was in the UK. Within 2 months of us, they just found this unbelievable. It was in some Siemens notes, and his correspondent, he was writing to somebody he got a letter from somebody in South Carolina who sent him this thing, and they just found it. It was like the second printing of the Declaration of Independence, which is worth God knows how much money, so there's stuff out there. We're going to keep finding stuff. This is the best shot we got with the information I've got at the moment, and more guaranteed, more will be revealed.
Thank you, gentlemen. And just before I go to Joe, Bill, I just put up the appendices. Did you want to mention something on that now, or do you want to just leave it on? I just think this is the one you might have been talking about, but you can tell me if I'm wrong. But hopefully you can see it on the screen. Is this the one, Bill? Appendix 1? No, it's on Akron, Ohio survey. Hopefully you can
Yeah.
And you got the number 7. Is the number 7? Is this what you wanted to see? I'm sorry, just bear with me. It's just here. Here you go. Is that what you wanted to get down to?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They told me varying stories. Many of them almost miraculous, but all remarkably alike in the technique used and the system followed. Briefly, this system was. So,
Yep. Okay.
it sounds, I think Frank is suggesting, he's not saying clearly, but I think he's suggesting that he put the list together. He cobbled it together from what he had been told by all those people. But that's, again, boy, we're in speculation zone here, guys. It's just yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bill. So that's in the appendix 1, Frank Amos's notes on Akron, if you want to get more on that. But we have Bill Shevak reading those appendices on our website if you want to listen to that. Great to have that as well. Joe, thank you for stepping in today. You went live.
That was
I
fun.
appreciate it. Thank you. You got a question?
Thank you for asking. Thank you, Bill, for all of the research that you did. I have to rethink my story of how the steps were written, because I've been telling. I'll tell you the story I've been telling for years. I heard an audio recording of Bill's speaking, and he recounts a meeting that took place in Clinton Street, and he was meeting with a bunch of the guys and trying to figure out what to put in a big book. And Lois came home from work, and she's in the kitchen. And they're talking about what to put in the book, and somebody's saying, it might have been Bill, we got to tone down the God bit, because the World's Fair is here. Science is coming on really strong. We got to be logical. You got to tone down the God bit. And Bill said, and in the kitchen, you could hear the clanking of dishes. And a couple of minutes later, Lois appeared in the doorway, and she basically said, "You all have to leave," and they left. And she laced into Bill and said, how dare you talk about, toning down the God bit, you're only here because of God, and blah, blah, went on and on. And so he said that night, after Lois lambasted him, he went into this little tiny, it was probably a closet under the stairwell. And there must have been, I'm just assuming there was a little desk in there. And he said he wrote the 12 steps. I don't know. Have you heard that version, Bill?
Yeah, Joe, I've heard that story, but I've never heard it. I've never heard Bill Wilson tell that story. I've heard it's one of those stories you hear around Alcoholics Anonymous, but but that doesn't mean it's true. And I mean, if Bill ever told that story in one of his talks, or he ever wrote that in any place, nobody has ever shown it to me, because that would be a big deal story to go in this chapter. And it sounds to me like an urban legend, Joe. Now, again, I'm speculating, but it's one of those wonderful stories, like Lois supposedly said to him, well, when he didn't get anybody sober before he's getting ready to go out to Akron, Ohio. And Lois says, well, that's not true, Bill. You stayed sober. We haven't been able to find it. I mean, the people at Stepping Stones are crazy to find. They want to find everything. That's a story they get asked about all the time, and nobody can find it. And I was up there one time, and Sally said to all the docents, she said, if you guys find, I questioned the story. She said, if you guys find that story, I'll give you $50. And I said, I'll give you 100. And nobody's ever found a version of that story by the people who supposedly did it. So that was just, it's a little, that story's, I mean, maybe it's true, but story sounds a little too cute to me, just a little too cute.
It does, and but it was Bill's voice, as I remember. It was many years ago, so I'm gonna go digging for it.
Good man, I would love to hear that. More will be revealed. I got it.
Good man,
All
Joe.
right, thank you so much, Bill.
Keep us updated on that. So we're going to Azel. Hi, Azel.
Hey, David. Thank you, and thank you, Bill. Hello, everyone. Azel, Real Alcoholic. On page 454, where you give the excerpt of the stories, and I'm talking about the specific one, the fearful one by Trowbridge. And it was stated that he was from Ohio, and I thought that he was from Detroit, Michigan.
He was from Detroit, and that was David who came up with those attributions. So
I knew it was, but I didn't want to put him on Front Street.
Yeah, but I did say it as a disclaimer. That's not to do with Bill. We got it from a book, but we did say that.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that point.
Like, you could have put in the chat to me, Azel. You didn't embarrass me in front of everyone.
No. We need as many clarifiers as we can get in this project. It's a group project here, and that's what we're trying to do. Thank you, Azel.
Good stuff, Azel.
Thank you.
I'm above resentment, Azel. You're okay. Tim L. Tim L.
I agree that this compilation of all the original people's versions from their stories of how they got sober is very, very interesting. It's very interesting in the diversity of exactly what they say of how they got sober. The attributions, were those just added for today's? They're not in the printed book. This is were the attributions just done for clarity in today's reading?
Yes.
Or
yes.
They actually, okay, just done for today's reading.
I just didn't bother to put them in the book, because that wasn't the point with the guy's name. I mean, I had to tell people where they could find it in the book. So
it's a wonderful compilation, though. Thanks.
Thank
Bill.
you. Thank you,
Tim. Anyone else like to jump on? We have.
Oh, maybe I can go to dinner now.
Couple of minutes. Well, let's just then. If we're going to do that, I have something I want you to watch with us, because Bill Sherberg, on your YouTube channel. I have to put this up on the screen, please. Stick with me, everyone. And I'm going to put this for Dennis as well. Our friend Dennis has passed, and Bill Sherberg's. This is from Conscious Contact. Is going to come up shortly. So there's Dennis. We call him Dennis, of course. His name is Harold. He called himself Dennis, I should say, not we called him Dennis. He's passed, and so what we do, and Bill will do, he'll close the meeting in the usual way after this, but we'll have this lined up. Hopefully we come up all right. This is from the 11 steps, Conscious Contact from the cutting room floor, I believe. This was from the cutting room floor where Sherbrooke says this, and I've quoted it, but listen out for it. And this is Bill Shaver. I think it's a great quote. Bill Shaver said, I might not have any supernatural beings in my life, but he says, I'm loaded with mystery. Now, I'm just going to leave it at that. Listen out for that. That's a wonderful statement. I might not have any supernatural beings in my life, but I'm loaded, he says, with mystery. What a great line that is. I'm going to just play this up here for us. Hopefully it comes up good for us. Now, this is on his YouTube channel if you want to go back and listen to it again. So it's only 3 minutes or so, and it's from the cutting room floor. Bill will tell us about it in a minute. So hopefully it's going to come up for you now. I'm just waiting on the internet signal coming through. Here you go.
One of the most important parts of my spiritual life is my meditation practice, which I have you and your wife Adele to thank for.
Yeah. Adele and I, after she passed away, I said to the man, and we've been together for 28 years, and we've been meditating at least pretty much once a day, many times twice.
You guys were always trying to get me to meditate. I didn't want to hear about it. You know, I was like, I don't need a new spiritual practice. I'm very good. Thank you very much. Your wife at one point was trying to convince me that I should be having a meditation practice on a daily basis. And I was just strong on it. And she started poking me in the chest one night. She said, Bill, you can't be sober, sane, and healthy on 11 and a half steps. Of course, prayer and meditation are the hallmarks of the 11th step. And I wasn't doing any meditation, so I was only doing 11 and a half steps, according to your wife. And she was right. She was right. And there was this meeting you wanted me to go to. It's one of those stupid woo-woo California meditation meetings. And I was amazed at all the different things people were doing, this wide variety of stuff. It wasn't like it was, this is what you've got to be doing, you know? It was all different stuff. I came home from California. I didn't know a single person, not a single person, who had a daily meditation practice. Also, I started a meditation meeting. And that's grown and grown and grown and grown. It's how things work. We share our experience and our strength and our hope, and it makes changes in other people when we do that. And this was a huge change for me.
And the linkage that happens is so powerful.
And I've done all kinds of different things. I've read all kinds of different books. My personal goal with meditation is to be more present. I want to be also a part of. I don't want it to be inside and outside. I want it to be as much one as possible. So in the mornings these days, I sit in front of an open window and I just look at what's going on out there. All the changes, everything changes, everything dies, nothing is permanent, nothing is eternal. And this is my object lesson every single day. But some days that's a really profound experience for me. I get questioned by a bunch of people who know about my lack of belief in any kind of divinity, because they think if you don't believe in God, you can't have a spiritual life. I mean, I don't believe that at all. So when I'm trying to enlarge my spiritual life, it's being open to the mystery. The mystery. I may not have any supernatural beings in my life, but I'm loaded with mystery. Loaded with mystery. And I'm not looking for simple solutions for that, but I do want to investigate the mystery. I want to embrace the mystery, and I want to be in awe of the mystery, because I think that's a spiritual response.
Wow, how good is that? I want to be in awe of the mystery. I want to embrace the mystery. Oh my God. I'm going to say it sounds like an alcoholic talking about a drink, really, to me. That's incredible. I love that. That's just beautiful, Bill.
That cut didn't make it into the movie for whatever reason, and Kevin was just Kevin was up here Thursday and spent some time with Sarah and I, and he said, you know, that was just a rough cut. I hadn't polished that up yet, but I sent it to Jay and he just gave it to you and put it up, you know. So, but you know, it's just that whole story about Adele poke. She poked me in the chest and gave me that. You can't get sober, sane, and healthy on 11 and a half steps. Because I was being a pain in the ass. You know, I was telling her I was 25 years sober and thank you very much. I did not need another religious practice. Thank you. And, but anyhow, so anyhow, they were both Kevin and Jay were a little unhappy that didn't make it into the movie for whatever reason. So Kevin cut this little quickie thing and put it together for Jay, and I liked it. I liked it. I think it's really important. I think it's really important that 11 and a half step line is a killer. If you're a serious AA person and you're not meditating, it can be devastating. And I never forgot it, I'll tell you that, even though it took me another year and a half to start meditating. So,
well, thank you, Bill, for sharing that with us. It's on your YouTube channel. If people want to get it, just type in Bill Schaberg. There's a lot more goodies in there as well. We started, as I said, the big book. Bill goes through chapter by chapter, and we've done the forwards last night. We had a really good turnout for that last night. Really good turnout, considering you weren't even in the room with us, physically, so to speak. You weren't virtually with us, but we watched your presentation. It was great. We had a great discussion as well after. So thank you for that. And we're going to do the doctor's opinion sometime next month. We're going to go through that, and hopefully we'll get you along sometime. So back to you, Bill. We'll do the close in your usual way. Thank you.
thank you, David. Thank you all. Thank you all. I loved reading that chapter today. As David said, it's my favorite chapter. And I was telling Sarah that, and I said, the problem is that there's about 4 favorite chapters that I got in that book. But that's the one. That's the one. If I got to pick one, that's the one I'm going to pick. You know. Oh man. Let's have a moment of silence. Moment of gratitude for being sober and having the lives we have today, whatever those lives may be like. They're sober lives. They're not drunk lives. Let me respectfully remind you, William, life and death are of supreme importance, and time swiftly passes by and opportunities are lost. You really need to awaken to the present moment. Take heed. This night, tonight, this very night, your days are diminished by 1. Do not squander your life.
Thank you, Bill. Thanks, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Bill.
Thank
Thank you, Bill.
everybody.
Thanks,
Wonderful.
Bill. Thanks, David.
Wonderful meeting.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Beautiful.
That was, thank you, David.
Wonderful.
Like a good drink.
Thank you, David.
Very good.
Thank you all.
And
And me
Gigi
too.
for reading.
T-double-O.
David, you have a
Wonderful.
couple people asking in the chat how to get onto the WhatsApp group for flyers.
Yeah, so who's that Gigi said again? Sorry.
Kathy and Yolanda want to know how to get onto the WhatsApp group.
Oh, send me your,
get their
if you want, I can give you my number, but you can put your number in the chat and I'll add it to it. I'll add it to the WhatsApp.
Oh,
You've got me on WhatsApp, of course, for you to get it, yeah? You got me on WhatsApp.
Thomas has been very
Let me
helpful.
put my number in the chat. That'd be the best to help everyone, won't it, really, if I did that. So do you have to put your prefix in, whatever that is? So I put it. You add me to your messages, I suppose, your contacts. So that's my number. So put that in, and I'll then add you. Yeah, does that make sense? But I have your number anyway, Caddy, and I think I have Yolanda. You sent me a number as well, Yolanda.
Yes, sir.
I can add you, but you don't have to do that, and I'll just send you a message, and you can
Thank you
add
so
yourself.
much. Yes, I sent you a message earlier, and I just sent it to you again, but I can.
I'm okay. If you have it, I'm looking at it now. I'm just writing down Caddy's one, 6456.
Thank you so much. This is a great meeting.
Oh, this is just with Mr. Sherman.
Good night, everybody. Good night, David. Thank
See
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye. Good night, all.
It was great. Bye, Azel, if you're still on. Bye-bye.
Yeah, Azel's still here, is he? Is he still there?
No,
he's
it's great
gone.
to see him. Okay, bye, David.
See.
You know how I found out about this, David?
Oh, how did you?
I go to the Welcome Home meeting out of South Africa,
Oh.
and there's a lady by the name of Braca. She must get
Yeah, I
flyers.
know Braca. Yeah, Braca does the fly. She does flyers as well. She's from Israel. Yeah.
Yes. And so she sends out 6 flyers a day.
She
And
does.
today I saw your flyer, and so that's how I came on.
Well, that's great. Well, great. Well done you for jumping on, because you just came in at a very good chapter as well.
And what chapter is it?
This was number 23. You know the book that we're reading, don't you? You do know that writing the big book, The Creation of AA.
I just found it on Amazon.
Oh, good. So
It says writing the big book.
writing the big book, The Creation of AA, that's the one. And
Yes. Should I buy it and take notes?
well, it's up to you if you want to do it, but we will be going through it again. But we're into chapter 24 of it now. So there's 31 chapters. So you've got 7 more chapters. But you can, I mean, it's up to you. It's just a huge tomb of work, and it's 31 chapters. But we go through it once every year, you know, because it takes 9 months to
once
actually.
every year.
Yeah, we go through it once a year. So I said we go through once a week. That's with the author. Next time we'll probably go through. We mightn't have the author with us.
Okay.
Yeah, so he lets us do it on our own now and again. We do it on our own now and again. So we'll be doing it again. We'll definitely be doing it again.
Okay, well, it's better now than never.
But you can get it on. Just to let you know, you can get it on Kindle as well and stuff like that. So.
Okay.
And you can. He's going to have the publication rights shortly. So he'll be producing or publicating, whatever they call that word, publicating. Is that publishing? Publishing. They'll be publishing a new one under his publication title. That'll be coming up in probably this year, because he's just won the rights back from the publishers.
Okay.
Does that make sense? You understand what I'm
Yes, that he'll have his own like little website business so that
yes,
we
and
don't
he will
have to go
distribute
through
it.
Amazon.
Yeah.
So, well, maybe the book will be a little less
And
expensive.
then all the updates will be in that then as well, because in one of the editions you might be getting, although the one on that Amazon are doing have all the updates, but there is some other editions out there.
Yes.
But
Okay. I think I'm going to wait then.
Yeah, it might be best to wait, because we have it, and as I said, you can get it on Kindle if you want. If I don't know, it's only the price. I think it's only the price of a drink and a half. You know, it depends on where you're at in your recovery, but it is only the price of 2 drinks, maybe.
Yeah, here it's 41. Oh, a hard copy. They don't have soft copies.
What about the Kindle? How much is the Kindle on it?
It says audiobook. It doesn't have Kindle.
Oh, it does not. Where are you coming? South Africa?
Oh, South Africa.
Is that South Africa?
Going to South Africa. I try to go there every day.
Oh, you're not in South Africa. You're in the United States.
No, I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada,
wonderful,
USA.
Oh, okay. Well, I think you should be able to get the Kindle over now.
Well, it is audio, and it's less than $1. I don't know how much that translates to.
Less than $1 for the audio.
Audiobook.
Really, $1.
Well, they give it to you so you get subscribed.
Yeah,
to
it
Audible,
is with the
what they
membership.
do.
Oh,
Right.
you're getting
It's
it
a
as- you're getting it
membership
as a-
to Audible is what they do. Right.
You're
So,
getting it. Oh, that's only an introduction. You have to join Audible then, of course. Yeah, all right. Yeah, I see.
yeah.
Which is a great
The
platform.
one
I
good-
love Audible. Audible are great, yeah.
It is good.
Mm.
The one great thing about Bill owning this book is that it won't go out of print. Bill
Right.
wrote a wonderful book about Nietzsche, and it went out of print. You can't even hardly find the book. You've got to go to some small obscure library and find it, and it's hard to find. It's very hard to find. So,
Well, I have gotten audiobooks from Amazon before, and then I'll just cancel my membership, and then they stay on my list, which is
Okay, well, that's a good way of doing it too, I suppose. But he's going to call the next one, the second edition. He's going to call it. He's done 6 printings of it. The next one is going to be when he starts to publish it. It's going to be the second edition.
That'll probably be better. I'll wait. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, nice meeting you. Thanks for jumping on, and I'll add you to the WhatsApp.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful rest of the evening, I think. Okay, bye.
Thank you, Yolanda.
Bye.
And Dina, you've been waiting.
Yes, I just want to ask one question about when he wrote his story. He didn't have any steps. He just made all that up. He had all that in his head. Or he had the 4
when
steps.
Bill wrote his story in the May of he wrote the story. His stories. He wrote 3 versions of it.
Okay.
So the one in the book is the final one, I think. So so he's wrote 3 drafts of it, and he started in May. So May and June of 1938. And he wrote those, as we read tonight, that chapter was written when he wrote the steps was in December 1938.
Okay.
So no, he had no steps when he was writing them.
So yeah, so that was just divine writing.
Isn't Because what you're doing at the moment, you're starting to rearrange the information in your mind because you're getting a lot of new information.
Okay. A good part that I really liked too was when they talked about him. He went back up into his room to nurse his ulcer because they got in an argument.
Yeah.
He always is, to me, sounds like he's just got the greatest life. You know, he doesn't have an ulcer. He goes out and hangs out with the Rockefellers. He's writing a book. He can't get a job. He's got a wife. He doesn't drink. He's trying to do the AA thing, you know. So I'm glad to see he had a little bit of tension going on, kind of.
Right. And the human element of it, of course.
A human element, yes. But then,
yeah, because people think it just sometimes even yourself in recovery. Some people who knew come up to me. I'm like to them, I'm 30 years sober, so they might think I did no work on me. So I have to tell them, I have to do a lot of work. I didn't just wake up one day and go, I've got to. What you have to do, as we read, lots and lots of work, painstaking stuff, And we're getting, I don't know. Sherbrooke said tonight more will be revealed. We're only getting a glimpse of what was going on, And he's done a fair amount of digging, so I'm sure there was a lot more stuff going on.
A lot of digging, and all those stories, talking about God, and it was just beautiful.
See, this is for me. I love the flowery, as we said last week, the flowery language. I just love that. Now, I don't take it literal, thank God, I don't. But I love the poetry of it, if you want. Sherbrooke said that what I quoted. Sherbrooke said he loved the mystery of things. I buy into that. When people give me factual stuff that they think is factual, or they concretize the message, and it just becomes, for me, it becomes very bland.
Yeah,
I think something.
There's no mystery.
Yes. Everything is a mystery. We all know that everything's a mystery. There's no one can tell me for certain what happened in the beginning of creation. No one can tell me that.
Okay.
No, they can tell me, but they can't tell me factually what happened.
Right. I think that'll sum it up
You know
for
what I
now.
mean? So
I'll write my questions down.
You took a lot of notes. As long as I don't take things too literal, I'll be all right.
Yeah. All right. And just want to say, nice haircut.
You noticed, I'm impressed. Very good.
All right. I guess that's it for me, man. Thank you so much for a great meeting. I'm gonna go to my in-person and not get in an argument with how the steps were brought up. It's pretty easy. Nobody really cares. I mean, they're all pretty easy going.
We're all easy going. I know we don't take ourselves too goddamn serious here.
Yeah.
We do take the message of recovery very serious.
Very serious, David.
We do because we're dealing with people's mental health. But can't transmit something you haven't got. Not you, but me as well. I can't transmit something I haven't got.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, have a good night. Thank you so much.
You too, Charmer Dina.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Zel's, you okay?
I am okay. I have been a real follower of reading about Marty Mann and Lovett and Bill. And Bill was Marty Mann's their person, but I don't see that gets mentioned much. And
do you go onto the website, or do you go onto the Facebook pages, the history pages?
Sure. You mean in the book?
On the internet, history only. We're put up an article about it the other day about Marty Mann.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I get my if anything out that I can.
Go into history only and type in. They have a search engine up the top. Let me get it for you. I get it for you here. They have a search engine on it. It's called. Just put in Marty Mann on it if you want, but I can get it for you here. Let me see.
Marty Mann.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should come up. They should come up what's there,
Okay. Because I have the book that she wrote that.
Yes, the primer.
That
the primer
I've
on
been
alcoholism.
reading.
Yeah, she wrote a primer on alcoholism.
Yeah. Yes. And just generally the role of women
Yeah, well, at the time, we
during
have to
this whole
remember
time.
the time it was written as well is what's important, isn't it, Zelch? The time that she put it, that she wrote it, you know, what they were doing, wasn't like it is today. She did drink,
Right,
she drank, I
exactly,
think,
right.
yeah.
I was just going to say, it's just that Lois and Marty Mann were very close.
Right. Well, I suppose at that time they probably would have been, yeah.
So that's just interesting to me. That's all. I guess I like to look at the things. See, I haven't even got 7 years in yet. That's
It's a
coming
long
up in a
time
couple
though.
of months.
I know it's not a lot compared to others, but it is a long time. If you say that to a newcomer, you've only got 7 years, he'd bite your hand off. You know. Now look, I'm gonna put this in the chat. Hopefully you can get it. Don't ever say only again though. So if you want to copy that link in the chat there, you see the link I just put in the chat?
I'm looking for it.
Yeah, just in the chat. If you press that, you should be able to go straight to the article. It should bring you straight to the article.
Okay, I will look for that.
Okay, you copied it?
Yep.
Okay, well, I'll talk to you in the next episode. See you soon, yeah?
Okay, you got it. Take care.
Thanks, Els. God bless you.